Hey guys, welcome back. Let's talk fish. Do you have fish for your aquarium? Do you want fish for your aquarium? Do you have an aquarium? If you don't have an aquarium and you need to get one, there's several ways that you can do it. You can order the one off of my shop, or you can order a box of Tic Tacs or something and use those, or something plastic like a cosmetic container. But in the meantime, these fish I've put together on a sheet with some aquarium backgrounds and stuff. So what I've done here is I've laminated them and I've printed them out. And I've also printed them on plastic with sublimation. So I painted the back of the ones that are sublimated so you can see the image a little bit clearer because my tank is dark. But if you have a lighted tank, then you don't need to do that because the light will shine through and it'll show you your fish. Also, if you don't have a laminating machine and you just have a regular printer, then you can use pack and tape and then just put over top of it on both sides, and then you'll have that nice shiny effect. And the reason for wanting that shiny effect is so that the fish tank, when you put the epoxy in it, then you will have something for it to stick to without running the ink. All right. So as you can see, I've done several different ways with this, and now I'm going to show you how to cut it out. I'm using an X-Acto knife, and the reason I'm using that is because it's very pointy, and you need that sharp tip to go around the edge of the fish on the plastic. So you just want to do the sides, and then you want to come back in where that tail is at the point, and then bring it outward toward the top of the fish, and then toward the bottom of the tail. And then the same way on the other side, because what that does is that allows you to get that little spot really easily. If you do it the other way, you might end up running off with it. Okay, so continue to cut this out, and then once you get it mostly cut out, you're going to gently lift the fish up to see where you need to finish slicing it. Now, as you can see, there's a little spot that didn't cut, so then I went ahead and cut that out. The other thing is something with a rubbery end that would hold onto the fish and slice off any of the excess that you might have missed. And again, I painted mine white on the back so you're seeing it, but if you can't get it all off, or you're having a hard time because you can't get that small, use a marker and just cover it, and you'll never see it by the time you put it in the tank. Because remember, these are so small that by the time you put everything in the tank, you're not going to see that marker. As you can see here and here and here, with it in the tank, that's how it is. Now this is the one we're going to be working on today. Now I will tell you, this is not a tank that I have in my shop. This is one that I designed for a lizard tank, and I'm going to make it work for a fish tank just because I'm having so much fun making these tanks. And in here, I used a skeleton and some rocks that were smaller that I found on the beach out at Beverly Trenton. It's pretty cool, very nice beach. If you're ever in Maryland and you want to go there, that's a nice place to, kind of visit. It's kind of secluded a little bit, but it's a state park, so it's nice. Anyway, so basically what I'm doing here is I'm putting the fish in between the hands of the skeleton. And what that is because, or the reason that is because you need something to adhere the resin epoxy on, okay? So the UV resin. And you can put it pretty much anywhere. As long as it's touching something, your fish will look like it's swimming. So just move it around a couple different ways and decide which way, you think your tank wants to be, or what your fish want to be rather. And then once you have it where you want it, then you can go ahead and place it in, that spot with the UV resin. And when they're smaller fish, you can hide them inside of things and around things and behind things and stuff like that. So it looks like they're swimming out of it. And I think I might end up doing another tank with the skull just because I think he looks so cool. But I think for the next one, I think I might actually drill the holes out of the eyes and do that, because I think that would be interesting looking. But as you can see, it just depends on where you want to put your fish, and I'm just moving around in various locations to see where I like it best. After that, I've got my UV resin light, which you can get this stuff on Amazon pretty cheap. Then you want to get your UV resin epoxy, and it seems like it's expensive for this, but when you're using it for miniature and stuff like this, it lasts forever. I mean, it just never seems to end as long as you are, you know, using it and putting a small hole in the top. You won't waste it like you would if you poured it out on paper. And I'm just doing about 2 little dime or penny size circles and mixing them together. And once you do that, you know, you want to make sure that when you're mixing it, you don't have any swirls left in it. And the swirls will be the 2 different densities swirling together, and once it becomes one, it becomes one color. And you can't really see it on the camera, but you'll see it when you're actually doing it. And I'm using a toothpick because this is going to get thrown away. I'm also doing it on something that is going to get thrown away, because whatever it gets on, it won't be usable anymore because it'll be sticky, or you'll have the UV resin on it and it'll be hard. Alright, so I have a craft mat and a piece of plastic on top of my craft mat. Now I'm just applying that UV resin on top of my gar. Now a gar is a fish that likes to eat more fish. It kind of reminds you of a crocodile a little bit. I don't know. We used to have one when we were very, very young. And back before my husband was my husband, he had a tank with them. And I mean, they're pretty cool to watch, but it's kind of gross because they eat fish. And you have to feed them fish and stuff, so I didn't like that. But anyway, I decided to make a tank with it because of the fact that it's more of a freshwater tank than a saltwater tank here. So I'm going to go ahead and squish them in there, and it can be kind of tedious getting them in there once you have that epoxy on it, because you're trying very hard to get it to bend and push into a tiny little spot. And it's hard to do that when you're on camera. Now, if I wasn't on camera, I'd be using both my fingers and both my hands to do it completely. But don't touch your front of your fish. Just make sure you touch the edges. All right, now you want to go ahead and put a little drop of the resin on top of your fish so it runs down on the hand or wherever you're putting it. Just put a little tiny drop on there. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow it to drip down on there, and then when you use the light to cure it, it'll cure it as one so that the fish doesn't go anywhere. I'm just setting the light on top. It'll take about a minute or 2 to cure it. It doesn't take very long when you're working with this because it's super, super tiny. Like, the amount is just very little. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and put this one on the back, and if it slides, it's not a big deal, because when you put the actual deep pour epoxy in there, you won't see that it slid. It'll just look like it's one spot. And it'll all blend together. Now I'm just patting it here to make sure that it goes down in there. And I zoomed in on the camera a little bit so that you could see this a little bit more. So it kind of puts it a little out of the center, but it was a little further away in the original video. But now you can see what this looks like. You know, just a little bit there. And as you notice, the sand at the bottom, I've also done that in a different stage with the deep pour epoxy. And there's a video tutorial on how to do that. So when I put the deep pour epoxy in there, it'll all blend together and you won't see that anymore. So then, you know, the sand will be hard and everything, and it works out great. Now, with this gar and everything and the fish in there, I'm going to put the light on there one more time. Make sure everything's nice and cured and, you know, its location. And, you know, after that, we'll just pour some epoxy in there, and we're using the deep pour. It has to be deep pour for this, because regular epoxy will heat up way too much and then it won't turn out. I don't know if you can see it, but the fish do kind of look like they have a little bit of density to them. But look closely. And the other thing is, like, I don't know if you can tell by the greenery in here, it's was originally gonna be just greenery in there, but when I used the heat lamp or the heat gun, I melted it a little bit, which actually ended up being a happy mistake because I was like, oh, that looks like different greenery now. So I'm kind of glad I did that, and I'm gonna try it again to see how it works out. But yeah, the heat gun definitely melted my greenery, and I'm like, oh, interesting. But it worked. Now these are some ones that I did. This was nail art that I did with this, which was very difficult to work with because they were sticky and hard to get off of the edge. So that's why I decided to create my own. And then this here is another one with some nail art in there. And then this one, these are printed fish. And I just put a couple of them in the front. However, I realized that when I did this one, I have to lay it down on its side because it slid when I did that, and I didn't realize it till after I put the gravel in there. So I got a fish swimming under the gravel in there. And of course, you know, that bothers me. But you can kind of see with the greenery in here, it's all standing up and going different ways and stuff like that. Now, when you're doing your deep pour epoxy, you want to make sure that all your edges are sealed or it will leak out. And to prevent it from leaking out on anything, I'm using packing tape on the bottom of it. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to stop it from leaking out, but it will prevent it from leaking on other stuff as well. If it does leak out on like the edge of the table or wherever you have it to where it's at, make sure you're doing it on a surface that it doesn't matter or that it won't stick to. And the epoxy won't stick to the tape, so that works. But let it cure completely. This needs to cure for at least 72 hours. Or at least it does for the one that I'm using. And it literally takes like 72 hours. To do one of these tanks, it's like a week process. But if it does seep out of the seams because you didn't have them cured enough, let it cure completely, and then you can peel it off the edge of it. And it will peel off. I just used a little tiny box knife and pulled it off myself on this one. Because remember, this tank was meant for lizards, not meant for fish. My other tanks go together completely different. So the sealing process is a lot easier to get because it has a frame at the top that holds it and a frame at the bottom that holds it. And then the way it's done, it really works out much easier for this. Now, I'm tapping it here just to make sure that that epoxy goes down in any areas that maybe it didn't get the pour in. I didn't want to have an air pocket. All right, so once I do that, I'm going to top it off just a tiny bit more. And remember, your resin is going to settle a tiny bit. So if it doesn't leak out, it's still going to settle a little bit. And once you do that, you can use a heat gun or a torch, that whatever your epoxy calls for, and you want to go ahead and heat that up to get rid of some of those bubbles, or you can leave the bubbles. Personally, I like the bubbles in my tank because I feel like it makes it look more realistic, but this one had a lot of bubbles because I mixed it up really quickly. If you mix slower and you go in the same direction, you get less bubbles. But you can see here that it's all done, and if you want to get your tank or the gravel, all this stuff is on my shop, and then you can order it from there. But it's a lot of fun. The tanks that are made for the fish tank have a single black ring on the top and a single black ring on the bottom. All right, so don't forget to like and subscribe. Hopefully this video was something that was useful for you and your tanks. And I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thanks a lot.